Hey cinephiles, with the Oscars just around the corner, I thought it would be a worthwhile exercise to rank the 9 films nominated for Best Picture, especially now that I've seen them all. Because, you know, it's kinda hard to do that if you haven't. It seems like everybody and their mother is also doing this ranking, so allow me to add one more voice to the unhallowed chambers of film YouTube and Twitter. As an added bonus, I'm going to be briefly reviewing these 9 films as we go along. But before I get to that, I have some thoughts on this year's crop of nominees in general and why all of our rankings are somewhat suspect. Unlike some years, I don't think there's a bad film in the bunch this time around. I only need to think back to last year when the likes of Bohemian Rhapsody and Green Book were nominated, the latter somehow winning Best Picture like it was 1990 or something.
And the Oscar goes to Green Book.
These 9, while some are much more deserving than others, and Kubrick knows that plenty of films were snubbed so they could be here, this collection of nominees, it's not bad. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the very best films of 2019 were nominated, and that's always good to see. But man, oh man, does the Academy never cease to bewilder and disappoint. Looking over the 9 nominees, it was somewhat easy for me to pick the lowest and the highest, but the middle, that was an absolute war zone, literally in the case of 1917, and some of these are completely interchangeable. If anything, that just speaks to what an excellent crop of films that make up the majority of this list, which itself is a reflection of what I consider to be one of the best years of movies since I've been obsessively watching and ranking movies on an annual basis. Now, one thing that's certainly true of all lists I make, but I feel is especially relevant here, is how this ranking will hold up against time. In this case, it's a race against the clock, and what is actually the earliest Oscars ever. Historically, they have never been in early February before, leaving voters and us cinephiles in a lurch to watch as many nominated films as possible. But that's not the only factor. I can't help but think how this list would look if I made it a year from now, or a decade from now. Honestly, sometimes I think the award should be given out 10 years after the fact, so we can see just what films have aged the best or made the most impact. Certainly then we wouldn't have winners like Green Book and Argo. My point is, films hold up differently over time, and recency bias is a very real deal. Sometimes I wonder how many people vote for the last film they saw. As for me, some of the films I saw months ago, others I saw just last week, so that's certainly something to consider. As with all my lists on Cineflect, this is my personal ranking, which I'm sure you will disagree with, and so as always, I invite you to share your own ranking in the comments below. Alright, let's start the countdown. Number 9, Ford v Ferrari. To be perfectly honest, this was the easiest placement on the list. Now, I think this movie is fine, but just fine. Much like an automobile right off the Ford Motor Company assembly line, this feels made by committee for mass consumption. It's safe, it's sturdy, and with the right driver behind the wheel, Christian Bale, it makes its way across the finish line. Let's be real, this film is honored just to be nominated. Number 8, Joker. This is where I remind you that I think all these films are good to great, and that any seemingly low placement is only because I think the other films are better. Joaquin Phoenix gave one of the very best performances of the year and of his already remarkable career. He deserves to win Best Actor, and that is obviously where this movie shines the brightest. I thought the story itself, and the screenplay for that matter, was merely serviceable, but let's just take a moment to recognize how incredible this nomination is. If we were having lunch at the beginning of the year and you told me that Joker, as directed by Todd Phillips, the guy behind the Hangover movies, would be nominated for Best Picture, I probably would have choked and died. But it happened, and you know what? I'm not even mad about it. I like the unexpected, and I love to see the pearl-clutching haters out there lose their minds. Number 7, Jojo Rabbit. Like Joker, this is one of the more contentious Oscar nominees, and like Joker, I say bring it on. Given the subject matter, a Hitler Youth finding a Jewish girl hidden behind the wall of his home, and the fact that it's a comedy, complete with Der Fuhrer himself as the boy's imaginary friend, it's not hard to see why so many have taken issue or been downright offended by this film. Personally, I found it all kinds of hilarious and surprisingly moving. This is an incredibly difficult tightrope to walk, and I thought writer-director Taika Waititi and his fellow castmates pulled it off beautifully. Number 6, 1917. Simply put, this is an incredible feat of filmmaking. Remember what I said about recency bias? I feel like 1917 is probably the one film on this list that will benefit the most from the earliest Oscars ever. Because if anybody watched this film right before they voted, I guarantee they voted for this one. That is, if they saw it in a theater. I mean, I cannot fathom watching this on a screener, or on a screen smaller than a wall for that matter. If you haven't seen 1917 yet, please see it on the big screen. It is an essential cinematic event, one that admittedly pales with each passing day. Such is the case with films that make for a more exhilarating and visceral experience. That said, I cannot deny the impeccable craftsmanship at hand. The great Roger Deakins has outdone even himself. Okay, now we're getting to the big dogs. The next 5 are all great films in my estimation, and some will undoubtedly make my personal top 10 of 2019 list. Number 5, Marriage Story. This ironically titled dramedy is actually about a marriage coming to an end, featuring 2 of the finest performances of the year and some terrific supporting players. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll assess any marriage you've been a part of, you'll want to hold on to the one you love with dear, ever-loving life. Of the Noah Baumbach films I've seen, this one is easily my favorite. Actually, I don't think I have anything bad to say about this film. I think it's practically perfect, which is not something I can say about any other film on this list. So why is it only number 5? I don't know, maybe because the others swing harder or manage to pull off something that's more difficult? In any case, here's 4 reasons why. Number 4, Little Women. Greta Gerwig's streamlined, secular rendition of Louisa May Alcott's perennial wholesome novel is one of the most striking acts of adaptation in some years. With the spotlight trained on her resumed muse, Saoirse, born to play Jo March Ronan, this writer-director and her lead actress extract an autofiction through-line from the 19th century text that feels like a lifeline to our 21st century times. The seesawing timeline can be a tad jarring, and some of the casting quirks tripped up my initial watch, but I find this film incredibly inspiring and nothing short of an instant classic. Number 3, Parasite. Make no mistake, Parasite is the de facto film of the year, even if it's not quite my personal film of the year. If you polled the film community at large, I've no doubt that this would be the number 1 film. In fact, that's exactly what happened on Letterboxd. Since its debut at Cannes, becoming the first Korean film to ever win the Palme d'Or, it has steadily steamrolled over just about anyone who sees it, including me. It is an inventive thriller from a master filmmaker with an incredible ensemble cast, and to say more would be to spoil one of the most pleasurable movie-watching experiences of the year. Of all the films on this list, this is actually the one I would most want to see win Best Picture, if only so the Academy and the American public at large can further deteriorate their ridiculous defensive wall against quote-unquote foreign films. This is one of the few non-English language films to ever be nominated in this category, none of which have ever won, which would make for interesting trivia if it wasn't so damn pathetic. Whether it's xenophobia, illiteracy, or just plain old laziness, we should all aspire to do better. Number 2, The Irishman. Martin Scorsese has had a busy 2019. He released 2 films and reduced millions of Marvel fans to utter immaturity for merely expressing his opinion. It's tough to say which was the best accomplishment, but I'll have to go with The Irishman, a decade-spanning mob epic with 3 powerhouse performances from De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci, and over an hour of screen time for each of them. The widely touted de-aging effect can show its seams, and best case scenario, this movie would have been made a decade or so ago, but better late than never. The man who revitalized the organized crime film has now put it out to pasture with the most melancholy final chapter the genre has seen. Number 1, not surprising anybody familiar with me or my channel, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I have already covered Quentin Tarantino's latest film extensively, but to briefly sum up my adoration, this genre-defying reverie transported me to 1969 Los Angeles for a couple hours, and I never wanted to leave. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a love letter to the past, how places used to look, how people used to live, and how movies used to be made. And if Tarantino has anything to do about it, they still can be made that way. And that's how I would rank the 2020 Best Picture nominees. Have you seen these films? If so, how would you rank them? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you down there. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and subscribe to Cineflect for video essays, ranked lists, mashups, and occasional oddities. And click that bell next to the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified anytime I upload a new video. For Cineflect, I'm JS Lewis. Until next time, watch something good.